My name is Brandon Johnson, and I spent 15 years in prison for a crime I didn't commit. I'm 65 years old now, but it's not the years that weigh on me, it's the betrayal. While I was rotting behind bars, my supposed son, Ethan, was living like a king on my money, with my business, with everything I built from the ground up. Today, sitting in this small room I rent on the outskirts of the city, I look over the yellowed newspaper clippings that tell my story. Local businessmen sentenced for embezzling funds meant for rural schools. My younger face stares back at me from the paper. I never imagined my own blood would betray me like that, only to find out he wasn't my blood after all. But before I continue with the story, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and comment with where you're watching from. Your support means the world. The morning that changed my life started like any other. I woke up early, as always. By 5 a.m. I was already up, making coffee in the kitchen of my simple house on the outskirts of Austin, Texas. My custom woodworking shop was right behind it on the same plot of land. I had built it with these two hands, board by board, after leaving my hometown as just a boy. 30 years of hard work had allowed me to go from being an apprentice with nothing to owning my own business, employing 15 people, and earning the respect of the community. "Dad, you've got a call," Ethan said, walking into the kitchen still in his pajamas, even though it was past 7 a.m. "Who is it at this hour?" I asked, wiping my hands on my apron. I was just finishing up reviewing some designs for a large order. "It's Patrick," he said. "He says it's urgent, something about the school contracts." The government contract to furnish 25 rural schools was the most important project we had ever landed. It could guarantee work for 2 years and open the doors to more projects just like it. I took the phone with a sense of unease. "What's up, Patrick?" I asked, recognizing the agitated voice of my new partner, a man I had met through Ethan. I never fully trusted him, but he had important connections. "Brandon, they're auditing the project. They're heading your way right now. I need you to destroy the original invoices for the materials and use the new ones I gave you yesterday." "What? What are you talking about? I'm not destroying anything. All our papers are in order." "Listen to me carefully." His voice changed completely. "If you don't do what I say, we're screwed. I've already dipped into that money, and your signature is all over everything. You understand?" "I don't know what the hell you're talking about, but I haven't touched a single penny that wasn't accounted for," I replied, feeling that something was very wrong. "Suit yourself. You brought this on yourself." He hung up. I stared at the phone for a few seconds, confused and alarmed. When I looked up, Ethan was watching me from the kitchen doorway. There was something strange in his gaze. "What did he want?" he asked with a calmness that, looking back, seems chilling now. "I'm not sure. Something's not right with Patrick. He says they're auditing the project and wants me to destroy invoices." "Do you know anything about this?" Ethan just shrugged and shook his head. "You know I only handled the design side, Dad. The numbers are between you and Patrick." 2 hours later, while I was supervising work in the shop, 3 police cruisers pulled up in front of my house. 6 officers entered with a search warrant, followed by 2 men in suits who identified themselves as government auditors. My wife, Carmen, came out of the house, terrified. The workers put down their tools and watched the scene in silence. "Mr. Brandon Johnson, we're investigating irregularities in the school furniture contract," one of the auditors said. "We have evidence that documents have been forged and funds have been embezzled." "There must be some mistake," I answered, certain of my innocence. "All our papers are in order. You can check whatever you like." They spent 3 hours searching my office, my workshop, and even our house. They found a safe I didn't even know existed, hidden behind a false panel in my office. Inside were forged documents and a ledger with notes of irregular payments, all with my signature, perfectly forged. They also discovered a bank account in my name with deposits totaling nearly $500,000. "This is a mistake. I didn't put that safe there," I exclaimed in desperation. "I've never seen those documents. Someone is setting me up." The police handcuffed me in front of my employees and my family. As they led me away, I saw Ethan hugging Carmen, comforting her. Our eyes met for a second. I didn't see concern or confusion in his eyes, only determination. At the precinct, they interrogated me for hours. I told them everything about Patrick and the strange call that morning. I begged them to investigate him, to check the original invoices filed away in my office cabinet. But when they went to look for them, they had vanished. Only the fake invoices remained, showing purchases of premium materials, when in reality the furniture had been made with much cheaper supplies. I was held for 3 days before they allowed me to see a public defender. He informed me the situation was serious. Forgery, embezzlement of public funds, fraud against the government. I could be facing up to 30 years in prison. But there's something worse, the lawyer told me with a grim expression. Your son, Ethan, has given a statement. He says you confessed the whole plan to him months ago. What? I couldn't believe it. Ethan said that? It's a lie. He's my son. I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson. His testimony is devastating. He claims you planned to use that money to flee the country and that you asked for his help to forge the documents. My world collapsed in that instant. The betrayal was so immense, so incomprehensible, that I couldn't process it. My own son, the boy I held in my arms when he was born, whom I taught to work with wood, for whom I had sacrificed my entire life. The trial was swift and merciless. The evidence seemed irrefutable. The forged documents, the money in an account under my name, and worst of all, Ethan's testimony. He showed up in court dressed in an expensive suit I could never have afforded him, and looking me right in the eye, declared that I was guilty. He said he had started to suspect something when he noticed changes in my behavior, that he had overheard me on the phone talking about diverting funds, and that I finally confessed the whole plan to him one night after having too much to drink. My father told me that no one would notice, Ethan declared before the judge, that kids from poor districts didn't deserve quality furniture, that the cheapest stuff was good enough, that the government was corrupt anyway. It broke my heart to hear him speak like that. Every word was a dagger. I wanted to scream, to stand up and shake him until he told the truth. But the guards held me down. In the courtroom, Carmen was crying silently. She wouldn't look at me. She believed the lies too. When I was allowed to speak, I tried to defend myself as best I could. I spoke of my life, of my honest work, of how I had built my business without cheating or taking shortcuts. I mentioned Patrick and his strange requests. I pleaded with them to investigate further, but my voice sounded weak, even to my own ears. Who was going to believe me against the testimony of my own son? The verdict came a week later, guilty on all charges. The judge, wanting to make an example in a country tired of corruption, sentenced me to 20 years in prison. 20 years for a crime I didn't commit. This court finds it particularly egregious that the embezzled funds were intended to improve the educational conditions of children in marginalized communities. The judge said while delivering the sentence, "Your crime not only affects the public treasury, but directly harms the most vulnerable." As the guards led me away, I saw Ethan hugging Carmen in the front row. For a moment, our eyes met. There was no remorse in his, just a cold glint I couldn't interpret. That night in the cold, damp cell of the state prison, I cried for the first time since I was a child. I didn't understand why my own son had betrayed me like that, what I had done wrong as a father, at what point I had lost Ethan. I would spend the next 15 years asking myself those questions. Life in prison was hell at first. At 50 years old, I found myself surrounded by much younger, more violent men. They beat me, stole the little I had, and humiliated me. I survived thanks to my craft. They soon discovered I could repair furniture and make small wooden objects that the guards and other inmates appreciated. That earned me a certain degree of respect and protection. The first few months, I waited for news from my family. A letter, a visit, nothing came. Carmen filed for divorce 6 months after my conviction. I don't blame her. I imagine she truly believed I was guilty. What I could never understand was Ethan's silence. Not a single word, not one explanation. I learned to survive one day at a time. I became friends with an old man named Robert, who had been in prison for 30 years for a crime he hadn't committed either. He taught me how to stay sane, not to let hatred consume me. "Resentment is a prison within a prison, Brandon," he would tell me. "It eats you up from the inside, while those who wronged you live on without a thought for you." I tried to listen to him, but it was hard. Every night before I slept, I saw Ethan's face in the courtroom. testifying against me. His cold, calculating gaze, so different from the boy I had raised. 5 years into my sentence, I received my first visitor. It wasn't Carmen or Ethan. It was an 18-year-old young woman who introduced herself as Marissa. "I'm your granddaughter, Grandpa," she said with a shy smile. "Ethan's daughter." I looked at her, astonished. The last time I had seen her, she was a little girl of just 3. Now she was almost a woman. "Why have you come?" I asked suspiciously. "Does your father know you're here?" "No, and he must not find out," she answered firmly. "I've come because I never believed you were guilty. There's something strange about this whole story, and I want to know the truth." Those words were the first ray of hope in 5 years of darkness. Someone believed in me. Someone doubted the official story, and most surprisingly, it was my own granddaughter, the daughter of the man who had betrayed me. "Why do you doubt it?" I asked her. "Everyone believes I'm guilty." "Evidence. Evidence can be fabricated," she interrupted. "And I know my father, Grandpa. I've seen him talking with that Patrick guy. The way they run your business now, it isn't honest." Marissa began to visit me regularly, always in secret. She told me how Ethan and Patrick had expanded my modest workshop into a large factory. They no longer made handcrafted furniture. Now they imported cheap parts from China, assembled them, and sold them as if they were handmade. They had fired my old workers and hired others who accepted precarious conditions. Every detail she revealed was like salt in the wound. They had not only taken my freedom and my name, but they had also destroyed everything I had built with so much effort, the values I tried to instill in my business. "I'm studying law, Grandpa," Marissa told me during one of her visits. "When I graduate, I'm going to reopen your case. I'm going to prove you're innocent." Those visits gave me back the will to live. For Marissa, I decided to be on my best behavior, participate in all the rehabilitation programs, and work in the prison workshop. Anything that could reduce my sentence. I needed to get out to help her uncover the truth. And finally, after 15 years, the day of my parole for good behavior arrived. I walked out of prison at 65 with completely white hair and skin weathered like old leather. I felt like a stranger in a world that had moved on without me. Marissa was waiting for me at the gate. She was no longer the 18-year-old girl, but a 28-year-old woman, a full-fledged lawyer. She hugged me with tears in her eyes. "You did it, Grandpa. Now the real fight begins." What I didn't know at that moment was that the truth we would uncover would be far more painful than the 15 years in prison, because I would not only learn how Ethan and Patrick planned my downfall, but also the secret that Carmen had kept for 4 decades. Ethan, the man who betrayed me, the one who stole 15 years of my life, was never my son. The day I got out of prison, the world seemed strange and unfamiliar. The streets were different, the buildings taller. People walked around staring at small screens in their hands. 15 years can change everything. Marissa took me to a small apartment she had rented for me in a modest city neighborhood. "It's not much, Grandpa Mo, but it's a start," she said as she opened the door. "When we get back what's yours, you can have something better." "This is a palace compared to my cell," I replied, trying to smile. The apartment had 1 bedroom, a small bathroom, and a kitchen diner. The walls were freshly painted, and there was some basic furniture. On the table, a new cell phone. "I'll teach you how to use it," Marissa said, noticing my confused look. "You'll need to stay connected." "Does your father know I'm out?" I asked, sitting in the only chair at the dining table. My legs weren't what they used to be. Marissa shook her head. "I haven't told him, but he'll surely find out soon. News travels fast in this city, especially bad news for him." That first night of freedom, I couldn't sleep. The bed was too soft after 50 years on a hard cot, and the silence was unsettling. I was used to the constant noise of the prison, the snores, the occasional shouts, the metallic clang of doors. Now I only heard the distant hum of the city. The next day, Marissa came early. She carried a thick folder under her arm and wore a determined expression. "Grandpa, I want you to meet someone who's going to help us," she said as she poured coffee into 2 mismatched cups. "My law professor, Ted Quinn. He's an experienced lawyer and, well, he says he knows you." Ted, the name echoed in my memory, the son of Mr. Anderson from the carpentry shop where I learned the trade. "The one and only Orchon," a voice said from the doorway. There stood Ted, a man I remembered as a skinny kid who was always carrying books while I was learning to carve wood with his father. Now he was a 67-year-old man with gray but still full hair and lively eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses. "Brandon," I said, approaching to give me a hug. "What a terrible injustice. I always knew you were innocent." The three of us sat at the table. Marissa poured coffee for Ted as he opened the folder he had brought. "I've been reviewing your case ever since Marissa told me about it," he explained. "There are many inconsistencies, circumstantial evidence accepted without question, and the testimony of your son, which, to be honest, seems suspiciously perfect." "It wasn't a fair trial," Marissa intervened. "The climate was very tense. There were protests about corruption. The government wanted to make an example, and I was the perfect scapegoat," I added. "A common man with no political connections, accused of stealing money for poor schools." Ted nodded, pulling some documents from the folder. "Exactly, but there's good news, Brandon. Lieutenant Evan Miller has agreed to meet with us. He was the officer who originally investigated your case, though he was just a rookie then. He always had doubts about your guilt." "Why didn't he say anything then?" I asked bitterly. "He was young, under pressure from his superiors, but now he's about to retire and wants to clear his conscience. We're meeting with him tomorrow." After Ted left, Marissa stayed a little longer. There was something I had wanted to ask her for a while, but I didn't dare. "Your grandmother, Carmen, is she okay?" I finally ventured. Marissa's expression darkened. "I don't know, Grandpa. I haven't seen her in 5 years. She moved to Denver to live with her sister after she and my dad separated." "They separated?" I hadn't expected that. "Why?" "They argued a lot. My dad changed after he took control of the business. He drank too much, treated Grandma badly. One night things got ugly and she just left. She never came back." I fell silent, processing the information. So Ethan had lost his mother too. Part of me wanted to feel satisfaction, but I couldn't. I only felt a deep sadness for everything we had lost. The next day, Ted picked us up in his car to go to see Lieutenant Miller. We met at a quiet coffee shop on the outskirts of the city. Miller was a man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and a small scar above his left eyebrow. His eyes studied me intently as I sat across from him. "Mr. Johnson," he said, extending his hand, "I've thought about you many times over the years." "Why did you decide to help us now?" I asked, shaking his hand. "Because I was never convinced of your guilt. There were too many things that didn't add up, but I was just a rookie cop following orders. Now, about to retire, I want to set things right." "What things didn't add up?" Marissa asked, taking out a small recorder with Miller's permission. "The safe, for starters," the lieutenant replied. "It was very well hidden, a professional job. It didn't seem like the kind of thing an honest carpenter would install. And the money, exactly $500,000. Too round, too perfect." "And the forged documents," Ted intervened. "The fake invoices were convincing, but when I compared them to previous invoices from your business, I noticed small differences in the formatting. Someone had recreated them based on your originals. Someone who had access to them." "Ethan," I murmured. "He had access to everything." Miller nodded slowly. "I always suspected him and Patrick Taylor. When I tried to investigate them further, I was taken off the case. They assigned me to patrol in another district." A pretty clear message. "Do you have any evidence we can use now?" Ted asked. "Nothing concrete, but I have names. Suppliers who could testify about the materials actually used, ex-employees who were fired after you were arrested, a secretary from the Department of Education who handled the payments and was also mysteriously let go." Miller gave us a list with names and the last known addresses he had. It was a start. "Is there anything else?" the lieutenant said as he paid the bill. "One of the auditors involved in your case, Gerald Scott, died in a car accident 2 months later. It always seems suspicious to me." We left Miller with a promise to stay in touch. On the way back to my apartment, I felt a mix of hope and fear. For the first time in 15 years, there was a real chance to clear my name, but I also knew we were up against powerful people. Over the next few weeks, Marissa and Ted worked tirelessly, contacting the people on Miller's list. I wanted to help, but my face was too well known. If Ethan and Patrick found out about our investigation, they could obstruct it. One day, Marissa arrived, especially excited. "Grandpa, we found Ms. Lopez," she exclaimed as soon as she entered the apartment. "Lupita, my secretary?" "Yes, she's living in Phoenix now. She says she has documents, copies of the original invoices she saved before they disappeared. She always suspected something strange was going on and wanted to protect herself." That same afternoon, Ted drove to Phoenix to meet with Lupita. He returned the next day with a yellow envelope. "They're copies, but they're certified by a notary public," he explained, spreading the documents on the table. Lupita was smarter than they thought. When she noticed strange behavior from Ethan and Patrick, she started making certified copies of everything. Then she hid them at her sister's house. The original invoices clearly showed that the materials purchased matched what was billed to the government. There was no fraud on my part. "This is good," Ted said, "but it's not enough. We need to prove who forged the documents and planted the evidence." Marissa nodded thoughtfully. "We need more. Someone who saw Ethan or Patrick tampering with the documents or installing the safe." The opportunity came unexpectedly. One afternoon, as I was watching TV in my small apartment, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, I came face to face with my past. "Brandon," Carmen said, her voice breaking, "I need to talk to you." It had been over 15 years since I last saw her. Time had left its mark, her hair completely white, deep wrinkles around her eyes and mouth, but they were still the same dark eyes that had made me fall in love when we were young. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. She sat on the sofa, nervous, looking around as if assessing my situation. "I heard you were free from one of my sister's neighbors," she began. "At first I didn't believe it, but then I saw your picture in the paper, a small article about reintegrated ex-convicts." "What did you come here for, Carmen?" I asked, remaining standing. "To tell you I'm sorry," she replied, and tears began to flow. "I should have believed in you. I should have known you'd never do something like that. But Ethan, he convinced me. He said he had proof that he'd heard you, and you believed him instead of your husband of 30 years. She nodded in shame. "Not only that, I let him keep everything, the house, the business, everything we built together." She wiped her tears with a wrinkled tissue from her purse. "But I didn't just come to apologize. There's something you need to know, Brandon. Something I should have told you many years ago." Her voice trembled. Whatever it was hard for her to say. "Ethan," she paused, gathering her courage. "Ethan is not your biological son." The world stopped for a moment. The words hung in the air like something physical, hitting me with a force that left me breathless. "What are you saying?" I managed to articulate. "Before we got married, when we broke up temporarily, I was with another man. When I found out I was pregnant, I came back to you. I always believed he was yours. But years later, when Ethan was 15, I ran into that man. The resemblance was undeniable." "Who?" The question came out like a growl. "Who is his father?" "August Taylor," she replied in a whisper. "Taylor." The name resonated in my head. "Patrick's father." Carmen nodded, unable to look me in the eye. "August and I, it was only once. He was already married. I was hurt from our breakup. When I came back to you, convinced the baby was yours, August never knew about the pregnancy. Years later, when Ethan was already a teenager, August came to the workshop looking for you for a job. He saw Ethan and I think he suspected something. He sought me out later, confronted me. I couldn't deny it. "Did you tell Ethan?" I asked, trying to process what I was hearing. "Not directly, but I think he found out. One night I heard August arguing with his son, Patrick. They mentioned Ethan. They said he was Taylor blood. Shortly after, Ethan started hanging out with Patrick. They became very close. The truth was revealing itself before me like pieces of a puzzle. Ethan and Patrick weren't just partners. They were half-brothers. They had conspired together to get me out of the way and take over my business." "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because Ethan has gone too far," Carmen replied. "What he did to you, what he did to all of us, and now he's doing the same thing to Patrick." I heard them arguing. "Ethan is planning to cut him out of the business." She stood up, took an envelope from her purse and placed it on the table. "These are letters August wrote to Ethan. I found them hidden in his room after I left the house. They talk about you, about how they planned everything. I think they can help you clear your name." I took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside were half a dozen letters dated between 1 and 2 years before my arrest. Why didn't you use these before? Why let me spend 15 years in prison? Because I was scared, she confessed. Scared of Ethan, of what he might do to me. He had become different, violent. And then, when I finally worked up the courage and left, he threatened me. He said if I ever spoke up, he'd do the same thing to me that he did to you. She stood to leave, but before reaching the door, she turned one last time. I don't expect your forgiveness, Brandon. I just wanted you to know the truth and help if I can. I was terribly wrong about you, and I've paid for it every single day. After Carmen left, I sat in silence for hours. The letters spread out before me. In them, August Taylor spoke openly of Ethan as his son. He mentioned the plan to get me out of the picture and discussed how they would transform my modest workshop into a much more lucrative business once I was gone. The last letter, dated just a month before my arrest, read, "Everything is ready. The safe is installed. The forged documents are perfect. No one will suspect a thing. Soon you will have what is rightfully yours, my son." When Marissa arrived later that night, I showed her the letters. She read them with a look of growing horror. "Grandpa, this is..." She couldn't find the words. "This proves the conspiracy." "And if Ethan isn't my biological son," I completed, "it means I spent 15 years in prison for protecting a stranger. Someone who was never my blood." Ted came the next day. He reviewed the letters meticulously, verifying their authenticity. "With this, Lupita's invoices, and the testimonies we've gathered, we have a solid case," he said. "We can finally petition to reopen the case and request a full investigation into Ethan and Patrick." "How long will that take?" I asked. "The system is slow, Brandon. It could be months, maybe even a year." "I don't have a year," I replied with determination. "I've already lost too much time. We need to speed this up." Marissa, who had been deep in thought, spoke up. "I think I know how, but we'll need Lieutenant Miller's help." Marissa's plan was risky but ingenious. We met with Lieutenant Miller in my small apartment to discuss it. The idea was simple in theory. We needed to get Ethan or Patrick to confess to their crime, preferably on tape. "It's the fastest way to reopen the case," Marissa explained. "With a confession, the judges can't ignore us." "And how do you plan on getting that confession?" Ted asked skeptically. "I doubt either of them will invite you for coffee to admit they sent an innocent man to prison." Marissa smiled, that determined glint in her eyes that reminded me so much of myself when I was young. "They won't come to me. I'll go to them," she replied, as the concerned daughter who wants to reconnect with her father. "It's too dangerous," I intervened. "He won't suspect a thing," Marissa assured me. "I've maintained a distant but cordial relationship with him for years, precisely for this moment. He thinks I know nothing about what he did to you, that I just visited you in prison out of curiosity or youthful rebellion." Lieutenant Miller, who had been listening silently, finally spoke. "The idea has merit, but we need a more concrete plan. You can't just ask him if he framed your grandfather." "Of course not," Marissa agreed. "The strategy is to approach Patrick first. He's the weak link. Based on what Grandma Carmen told me, Ethan is planning to betray him. If I make him believe I want to help him protect himself from my father, he might let valuable information slip." We discussed the details for hours. Ted insisted on the legal risks, Miller on the physical dangers, and I on not endangering my granddaughter. But Marissa had an answer for everything. She had thought of every angle, every possible complication. "I'll wear this," she said, showing a small device that looked like a button. "It's a micro camera with a recorder. I'll put it on my blouse or jacket. It will record everything." "Where did you get that?" Miller asked, surprised. "The internet," she replied simply. "You can buy anything these days, Lieutenant." Finally, reluctantly, we agreed. The plan would begin the next day. Marissa would contact Patrick for lunch, pretending she wanted to discuss family business matters. Meanwhile, Ted would prepare all the necessary legal documents for when we had the confession. I could barely sleep that night. I was tormented by the thought of Marissa facing these men who had destroyed my life without remorse. What if they discovered her intentions? How far would they go to protect themselves? The guilt gnawed at me. Maybe I should be the one taking the risks, not my granddaughter. In the morning, when Marissa came to pick up the micro camera Miller had gotten for her, more reliable than the one she bought online, I tried to dissuade her one last time. "Let me do it," I pleaded. "I've already lost 15 years. I don't have as much to lose as you do." "That's precisely why it has to be me, Grandpa," she answered firmly. "No one would suspect me. They'd recognize you immediately and be on the defensive. Besides, I'm a lawyer. I know how to ask the right questions without raising suspicion." I couldn't argue with her logic. With a heavy heart, I watched her leave for her meeting with Patrick at a downtown restaurant. Lieutenant Miller would be waiting at a nearby cafe, ready to intervene if any trouble arose. The next 3 hours were the longest since my first day in prison. Ted stayed with me, trying to distract me with stories of past cases, but I could barely pay attention. Finally, when my cell phone rang, I nearly dropped it from anxiety. "Everything's fine, Grampy." Marissa's voice sounded calm. "We're on our way." Half an hour later, Marissa and Miller walked into my apartment. My granddaughter looked tired but satisfied. "We've got it," she said, pulling a tiny memory card from the hidden camera. Not a full confession, but enough hints to reopen the case. And something more. Patrick is scared. He thinks Ethan is planning to frame him in a new fraud scheme. We connected the card to Ted's laptop and watched the recording. Marissa had handled the conversation masterfully, starting with innocent questions about the business, expressing admiration for how they had expanded it, and gradually moving to her concern about her father's methods. "I'm worried he's repeating old patterns," she told Patrick in the recording. "You know, like what happened with my grandfather." Patrick's reaction was telling. He tensed up visibly and looked around to make sure no one was listening. "That was a different situation," he answered evasively. "Was it really, though?" Marissa pressed. "Sometimes I wonder if it was really him, or if someone else was involved." The camera perfectly captured the sweat that began to bead on Patrick's forehead. "Look, Marissa, some things from the past are best left alone," he finally said. "What's done is done. The future is what's important, and that's where you should be worried about your father." "What do you mean?" "Ethan has been making questionable decisions, moving money, altering contracts, just like last time. Except now he has no one else to blame." While not a direct confession, the implications were clear. Patrick was indirectly admitting that Ethan had forged documents in the past. "Do you think he could do something similar to you?" Marissa asked, feigning concern. Patrick's response was even more revealing. "He's already doing it. Last week I found out he's been forging my signature on corporate documents, setting the stage to accuse me of tax fraud. Just like..." He stopped himself abruptly. "Like with my grandfather?" Marissa finished for him. Patrick didn't deny it. He just looked down at his plate. "Your father learned from the best," he finally muttered. The rest of the conversation followed similar lines, with Patrick giving more details on how Ethan was preparing to betray him. He never explicitly confessed to participating in my framing, but the insinuations were clear enough. "It's not a full confession," Ted commented after we finished watching. "But it's a start. Combined with August Taylor's letters and the other documents that we have, it should be enough for the prosecutor's office to reopen the case." "The problem," Miller intervened, "is that Patrick will be on high alert now. If he finds out there's an investigation, he could disappear or destroy evidence." "That's why we need to act fast," Marissa said. "And there's something else I haven't told you. I let Patrick believe I'm on his side against Ethan. He asked me to look for certain documents in my father's office." "And you're going to do it?" I asked, alarmed. "Of course," she replied with a cunning smile. "It's the perfect opportunity to look for more evidence against both of them." "It's too dangerous," I insisted. "I won't go alone," she reassured me. "Lieutenant Miller will accompany me, pretending to be a private investigator I've hired." "Technically, I'm no longer on active duty," Miller explained. "I'm on leave pending my retirement. I won't have official authority, but I can protect Marissa." The plan was set in motion the next day. Marissa arranged a meeting with Patrick at the company's main office, now called Taylor Johnson Furnishings. Miller would accompany her as her advisor. Meanwhile, Ted and I would wait at his office, ready to receive any documents or information they could obtain. The wait was agonizing. Every minute felt like an hour. Ted tried to keep me calm, but he was nervous himself, constantly checking his phone. We shouldn't have allowed this, I muttered, pacing the room. It's too risky. Marissa is a smart, strong woman, Brandon, Ted replied. And Miller knows what he's doing. Trust them. Finally, after 3 endless hours, we received a text from Marissa. All good. On our way. We got what we needed. When they arrived, Marissa had a triumphant look I hadn't seen before. Miller seemed more serious but satisfied. We got it, my granddaughter announced, placing a flash drive on the desk. Accounting records, emails between Ethan and Patrick, everything we needed, and something more. She pulled a small, worn, leather-bound notebook from her purse. My father's personal journal. He had it hidden in a safe in his office. Patrick gave me the combination, thinking I would only look for the documents that incriminated him. How did you know it would be there? I asked. I didn't, she admitted, but I always remembered Dad writing in a notebook like this when I was a little girl. He used to say it was his life insurance. Ted took the notebook and began to flip through it. His expression grew darker as he read. This is, he muttered, this is much more serious than we thought. The journal contained detailed entries dating back 15 years. Ethan had meticulously documented every step of the plan to frame me, the installation of the safe, the forgery of documents, the bribery of key witnesses. He had even noted his reaction when August Taylor revealed he was his biological father. An entry dated 2 years before my arrest read, "My life changed forever today. August has revealed the truth. The man I thought was my father is nothing to me. My real blood is Taylor. I'm entitled to more than that ignorant carpenter can give me. With the help of August and Patrick, I'll soon have what is rightfully mine." Another entry, weeks before my arrest, was even more explicit. Everything is ready. The safe is installed behind the panel in the office. The fake invoices are perfect. We even got a bank account in his name where we've deposited the stolen money. My dear father won't know what hit him. My testimony will be the icing on the cake. The son accusing the father, a dramatic twist no judge can ignore. Carmen suspects something, but she's too scared to intervene. The entries continued through the years of my imprisonment, documenting how Ethan and Patrick had expanded the business, abandoning craft production for cheap imports, firing the old workers, even changing the company's name to reflect Ethan's true heritage. There were also entries about Marissa, expressing concern over her prison visits. Marissa went to see the old man again. She says it's out of curiosity, but I don't trust her. She was always too close to him. I'll have to watch her more closely. Ted closed the journal with a solemn expression. With this, August's letters, and the financial documents, we have more than enough. We can go straight to the district attorney. No, I intervened. I want to confront him first. I want to see his face when he knows we found him out. That's too dangerous, Ted objected. It doesn't have to be in person, Miller suggested. We could arrange it differently. We discussed several possibilities until we settled on a plan. Marissa would contact Ethan, asking to meet urgently at the old family house, which he now owned. She would tell him she had discovered something important about Patrick and wanted to warn him. Meanwhile, Miller and a trusted colleague from the police force would hide inside the house before the meeting. I would be in an adjacent room listening to everything. Ted would wait outside with the documents, ready to present them to the DA as soon as we had the confrontation on tape. The appointed day arrived quickly. Marissa had convinced Ethan to meet at the house at 7 p.m. Miller and his colleague, Officer Ramirez, entered 2 hours earlier and hid in the study. I hid in the small utility room next to the living room, from where I could hear the entire conversation without being seen. Seeing my old house after 15 years was an unexpected emotional blow. Everything had changed. The simple but well-made furniture I had built myself had been replaced by ostentatious, characterless pieces. The family photos were gone, replaced by abstract paintings that seemed bought just to match the decor. Nothing remained of the warm home Carmen and I had built. At 7 o'clock sharp, I heard the front door open. Ethan's voice, deeper and harsher than I remembered, called out, "Marissa, where are you?" "In the living room, Dad," my granddaughter replied with admirable calm. From my hiding spot, through a small crack in the door, I could see Ethan walk in. At his age, he was still a handsome man, his black hair just streaked with gray at the temples. He wore an expensive suit, and his posture was that of someone used to giving orders. If I didn't know the truth, I would have been proud to see him so successful. But now I only felt a mixture of pain and rage. What's so urgent? He asked, sitting across from Marissa. I have an important dinner in an hour. It's about Patrick, Marissa began, and about Grandpa. Ethan's expression changed subtly, a barely perceptible tension in his jaw. What about them? Your grandfather is where he deserves to be, and Patrick. My grandfather is free, Marissa interrupted him. He got out a few weeks ago on good behavior. Ethan froze for a second, processing the information. I didn't know, he finally said. Though it doesn't change anything, he committed a crime and paid for it. Except he didn't commit any crime, Marissa replied, her voice firm. And you know it perfectly well. Ethan's laugh sounded forced. What are you talking about? There was a trial, evidence, witnesses. I saw you forging documents, installing a secret safe, creating a fraudulent bank account in his name. Marissa completed for him. I know everything, Dad. We've uncovered everything. Ethan's face paled slightly, but he maintained his composure. You're delusional. Visiting that old man in prison has filled your head with lies. Lies? Marissa opened her purse and pulled out the journal. Like the ones you wrote in here? Or like when you made him believe for 40 years that you were his son? This time, Ethan couldn't hide his shock. He jumped up and tried to snatch the notebook from her. Where did you get that? Give it to me. Now I understand why you call it your life insurance, Marissa continued, moving out of his reach. You documented every detail of the fraud, every step to frame my grandfather. I guess you wanted to protect yourself in case Patrick ever tried to betray you. You don't know what you're saying. Ethan's voice trembled with rage and fear. That old man was a thief, a fraud. He deserved it. He deserved to lose 15 years of his life for a crime he didn't commit? Marissa's voice broke for the first time. He deserved to be betrayed by his own son? He was not my father, Ethan shouted, finally losing control. My real father was August Taylor, a successful businessman, not some miserable carpenter who settled for scraps. So you admit it, Marissa said. You admit you framed him, knowing he was innocent? Ethan seemed to realize his mistake. He tried to compose himself, but it was too late. I admit nothing, he said, trying to regain his poise. And if you think you can prove anything with that journal, you're wrong. I'll deny it's mine. I'll say it's a forgery. We don't just need the journal, Marissa replied. We have August Taylor's letters. We have the emails between you and Patrick. We have testimony from ex-employees who saw the safe being installed. And now, she gave a signal and the study doors opened. Lieutenant Miller and Officer Ramirez walked out. Now we have your confession on tape, she finished. Ethan looked at the police officers, then at Marissa, and finally towards the door where I was hidden. As if sensing my presence, his eyes fixed exactly on the crack where I was watching. It's time for you to face the truth, Marissa said, and there's someone else who wants to hear your explanation. That was my cue. With my heart hammering in my chest, I opened the door and stood before the man who had destroyed my life. The man who, for 40 years, I believed was my son. Time seemed to stop as I stepped out from my hiding place. Ethan's eyes widened, as if he were seeing a ghost. In a way, that's what I was to him. The ghost of his past, the living embodiment of his betrayal. Brandon, he murmured, taking an instinctive step back. Hello, Ethan, I replied, walking toward him with slow but steady steps. It's been a long time. My voice sounded strangely calm, even to myself. For 15 years, I had imagined this moment, dreamed of screaming, of demanding answers, maybe even of some kind of physical revenge. But now, standing before him, I only felt an immense sadness and a strange detachment, as if I were watching a scene starring strangers. You shouldn't be here, Ethan said, regaining some of his composure. This is my house. This was my house, I corrected him. I built it with my own hands, just like the business you stole from me. Everything you have, everything you are was built on my sacrifice and my work. Your sacrifice? Ethan's voice took on a mocking tone. Your miserable little wood shop? I turned that insignificant business into a real company. You never had vision, never wanted to grow, always settling for less. I settled for what was honest, I replied. For what I could build without stepping on anyone, without deceiving anyone, and above all, without betraying my family. Ethan let out a bitter laugh. Family? What family? I was never your son. You were never my father. It was all a lie. His words should have hurt me, but strangely they liberated me. The truth, however painful, was better than the lie I had lived. You're right, you are not my son, I conceded. My son would never have done what you did. My son would have had honor, dignity, compassion, all the things I tried to teach you and that you clearly never learned. I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, pain, shame. It vanished so quickly I couldn't be sure. I don't need moral lessons from an old man who just got out of prison, he spat. A prison you sent me to, I reminded him, where I spent 15 years for a crime I didn't commit while you lived in my house, spent my money, and destroyed everything I built. Ethan looked around, searching for an exit. His eyes fell on Lieutenant Miller and Officer Ramirez, who stood impassively by the study door. Then he looked at Marissa, who held the incriminating journal firmly. What do you want from me, Rifshaiting? He finally asked. Money? Revenge? What is it? Justice, Marissa answered before I could speak. We want you to admit what you did, turn yourself into the authorities, and help clear my grandfather's name. Ethan burst out laughing. Are you crazy if you think I'm going to do that? Fine, I'll admit it. Here, among us, I orchestrated the whole thing. I forged the documents, installed the safe, opened the bank account in his name. I even convinced Patrick to divert funds from the project and deposit them there. But no one will ever be able to prove it in a court of law. We are already proving it, Miller said, discreetly showing the small recording device in his pocket. Everything you've just said, combined with the documentary evidence we have, will be more than enough. The color drained from Ethan's face. He took a step toward the door, but Ramirez moved to block his path. There's no way out, Ethan, I said. It's time to face the consequences. There was a tense moment when I thought he would try to escape by force. I saw his hands clench into fists, his eyes calculating distances. But then something unexpected happened. His shoulders slumped slightly, and a look of defeat crossed his face. It was August's idea, he said in a low voice. He sought me out when I was 20. He told me he was my real father. He showed me proof. He told me about his plan to give me what was rightfully mine. I was confused, angry. I felt betrayed by Carmen, by you. August convinced me I deserved more, that you had stolen my true inheritance from me. And for that, you ruined my life, I asked. For money? It wasn't just about money, he replied, and for the first time I sensed something genuine in his voice. It was about belonging. August offered me a chance to be part of something bigger, to be a real tailor. You never understood my ambitions. You always wanted me to be like you, a simple carpenter. I wanted you to be an honest man, I corrected him, to build something with your own hands, to feel the pride of creating, not destroying. Whatever, he said with a shrug. It doesn't matter anymore. Do what you have to do. Lieutenant Miller approached and with surprising gentleness placed the handcuffs on Ethan's wrists. Ethan Johnson, you are under arrest for the crimes of forgery, fraud, perjury, and conspiracy to frame an innocent man. You have the right to remain silent. As Miller continued with the formal arrest, I watched the face of the man I had believed was my son for 40 years. There was no real remorse in his eyes, only a pragmatic resignation. He had run out of options and was simply accepting it. As they led him away, he stopped in front of me. One more thing, he said. Carmen, she knew nothing about the plan. She genuinely believed you were guilty when I testified. Don't blame her for that. I didn't answer. I just watched him walk away, escorted by the 2 police officers. The door closed behind them, and I was left standing in my old living room with Marissa by my side. Are you okay, Grandpa? She asked, taking my hand. I don't know, I answered honestly. I've waited for this moment for so long that now I don't know what to feel. That's normal, said Ted, who had just come in after seeing the patrol car leave. Justice doesn't always bring the peace we expect. The following days were a whirlwind of statements, documents, and meetings with prosecutors. The case generated significant media interest. Innocent businessman spends 15 years in prison, framed by his own son. Ethan and Patrick were formally charged. August Taylor would have been included in the indictment, but he had passed away 3 years prior. A week after the arrest, I received an unexpected visitor at my small apartment. It was Carmen, looking nervous and holding a large envelope. "Can I come in?" she asked timidly. I invited her in. She sat on the edge of the sofa as if afraid to get too comfortable. "I came to give you this," she said, offering me the envelope. "These are the property deeds to the house and the company documents. I got them from Ethan's safe before the police sealed it. Legally, they're still yours. Ethan never changed the official records. He only forged a power of attorney that is now invalid." I took the envelope with trembling hands. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "Because it's the right thing to do," she replied simply. "And because I need to do something, anything, to make up for the damage we caused you." "You didn't know." "I should have known," she interrupted. "I should have trusted you, not him. We were together for 30 years, Brandon. I knew you. Deep down, I think I always knew you were incapable of doing what they accused you of." Her eyes filled with tears. "The worst part is, that wasn't even the first time I betrayed you," she continued. "I betrayed you when I slept with August, when I hid the truth about Ethan from you. Our whole life together was built on that lie." I didn't know what to say. For years, I had imagined this moment. I had rehearsed words of reproach, of forgiveness, of reconciliation, but now I just felt a profound exhaustion. "The past is the past, Carmen," I said finally. "We can't change it now. We can only decide what to do with the life we have left." She wiped her tears with a tissue. "Will you ever be able to forgive me?" I looked at the woman with whom I had shared most of my life. She was aged, fragile, consumed by guilt and regret. What was the point of holding on to resentment? "I've already forgiven you," I replied sincerely, "but I need time to heal, to rebuild my life." She nodded in understanding. She got up to leave, but before she reached the door, she stopped. "Marissa is an extraordinary woman," she said. "She has your strength, your sense of justice. She never stopped believing in you, you know? Even when she was little, she always said her grandpa was innocent. She's the only good thing that came out of this whole tragedy." After Carmen left, I sat contemplating the documents she had given me. They were my past, my legacy, the life that had been taken from me. But strangely, I felt no urgency to reclaim them. 15 years in prison teaches you to value different things. The next day, I spoke with Ted about my plans. "I want to take back the company, but not for myself," I explained. "I want to restore its original essence, go back to handcrafted manufacturing, rehire the old employees Ethan fired. Then I want to donate it to a cooperative of artisans. Let them be the ones who run it, who benefit from it." "Are you sure?" Ted asked. "It's a considerable estate. You could live comfortably for the rest of your life." "I've lived for 15 years with almost nothing," I replied. "I don't need much to be happy. Besides, there's something more important I want to do." I told him about my project, to create a foundation to help wrongly convicted ex-inmates reintegrate into society. I wanted to use my experience, my story, to make a difference in the lives of people who, like me, had lost years due to judicial errors or false accusations. "It's a noble project," Ted said, "and I think I can help you structure it legally." The trial of Ethan and Patrick was swift, the evidence was overwhelming, and both ended up accepting plea bargains. Ethan was sentenced to 12 years in prison for fraud, perjury, and conspiracy. Patrick, who cooperated more extensively, received 8 years. A financial compensation was also ordered for the years I spent unjustly imprisoned, although no amount of money could ever give me back the time I lost. My name was officially cleared. The judge who presided over my case review offered a public apology on behalf of the judicial system, acknowledging the failures that allowed my wrongful conviction. The media covered the story extensively, presenting me as a symbol of resilience and dignity in the face of adversity. But the real healing came in smaller, more personal ways. One afternoon, as I was working in the backyard of the house I had reclaimed, repairing old furniture, I heard the back door open. "Can I help, Grandpa?" Marissa asked. I smiled at her and handed her a chisel and a piece of wood. "Of course. It's about time you learned the family business." We spent the afternoon working together. I taught her to feel the wood, to respect its grain, to work with it without forcing it. I told her stories from my youth, of how I learned the trade, of the first pieces of furniture I ever made. We didn't talk about Ethan or prison or the trial. We were just a grandfather and his granddaughter, sharing a moment of peace. As the sun began to set, Marissa asked me something that took me by surprise. "Grandpa, what did you feel when you found out my dad wasn't really your son?" I put down my tools and sat on an old workbench, thinking. At first, I felt anger, betrayal, I answered honestly. I thought about the 40 years I dedicated to raising someone who wasn't my blood, who ended up betraying me in the worst possible way. I felt used, cheated. Marissa nodded, waiting for me to continue. But then, I went on, I realized something important. For those 40 years, I was his father in every way that matters. I held him as a baby. I taught him to walk, to talk, to work with wood. I celebrated his achievements. I comforted him in his failures. The fact that we don't share blood doesn't erase those moments. It doesn't make them any less real. "But he betrayed you," Marissa said in a low voice. "Yes, he did. And that's something between him and his conscience. I chose to be his father, even without knowing the biological truth. And that choice, that commitment I made, says more about me than his betrayal says about him." "You're an extraordinary man, Grandpa," Marissa said with tears in her eyes. "I don't know if I could forgive the way you have." "It's not just about forgiving," I explained. "It's about understanding that hatred and resentment are burdens too heavy to carry with us. Prison taught me that. I saw so many men consumed by bitterness, turned into empty shells. I promised myself I wouldn't become one of them." In the months that followed, my life took a new direction. The foundation I created, freedom and justice, began to operate with the help of Ted and other dedicated lawyers. Marissa joined the project, contributing her legal expertise and her passion for justice. The old furniture factory returned to its artisan roots, now as a cooperative, employing 15 families, including some of my former workers. I never saw Ethan again. I learned from Marissa, who occasionally visited him in prison, that he had refused my attempts to make contact. According to her, he was consumed by a mix of shame and resentment, unable to face what he had done. Perhaps one day he would find peace, but that was his path to walk, not mine. Carmen and I met from time to time, usually with Marissa present. We never got back what we once had, but we managed to build a sort of quiet friendship based on our shared experiences and the love we both had for our granddaughter. One Sunday, almost 2 years after my release, I was sitting on my porch enjoying the afternoon. Marissa arrived with her boyfriend, a young doctor she had met during the trial. They had news. They were expecting a child. "You're going to be a great-grandfather," Marissa announced, beaming with happiness. I hugged her, feeling an emotion I hadn't experienced in many years. A new life, a new chance, a new beginning. That night, as I looked up at the stars from my porch, I thought about the strange path I had traveled. 15 years in prison for a crime I didn't commit, betrayed by someone I thought was my son, stripped of everything I had built. And yet, there I was, free, at peace, with a purpose and surrounded by love. Life sometimes takes us down dark and painful paths, but if we hold on to our integrity, if we don't let bitterness consume us, we eventually find the light. It's not our fate that defines our lives, but how we respond to it, the choices we make in the face of adversity. I spent 15 years in prison because of the man I thought was my son, only to discover he was never my blood. But in the end, I understood that true family isn't defined by blood, but by love, loyalty, and shared values. And in that sense, I have the richest family a man could ever wish for. As the stars shone in the night sky, I felt a deep gratitude, not for what I had lost, but for what I had found in the process. My true self, my purpose, my inner peace, and that, after all, was the true freedom that no prison could ever take away from me. If my story moved you, please subscribe to Whispers of Experience for more true testimonials like mine. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you don't miss any stories that will make you appreciate what truly matters in life.